Hello everyone, this is the Gamer of 7 here, back at it again, and today I want to talk a little bit more about my new personal favorite tabletop role-playing game, being what you see on the screen, Carbon 2185. Now this book is created by Dragon Turtle Games Limited. In my previous video, I listed about the different types of TTRPGs for beginners, or which ones they were for people who are new to the tabletop role playing world, and I listed off from my personal eyes what would be the best starter tabletop role playing games to get into, and one of them on that list was Carbon 2185. Now I want to get into the more I want to be more in depth about what Carbon 2185 is. So this is what this video is about. So what we'll be doing is first I will be explaining what Carbon 2185 is and explaining some of the details about it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, what is Carbon 2185? Well, it's obvious it's a tabletop role-playing game. Um, set in the cyberpunk genre, which is my personal favorite genre because it's just cool. Um, but the setting, it is set in a world where megacities are the only place that are livable, and the outside world is a barren wasteland that was stripped away by corporations looking for more resources and just basically destroying the planet. The core rulebook of Carbon 2085 is set in the golden city of San Francisco, where you will be playing, as I get down here, you will be playing as, well, one of these fellas. Now, in the vocabulary, this is what we call a cyberpunk, an anti-establishment rebel, which is you, the player character. And what I already find pretty cool about this is that it's got its own slang of words that I really like, which I must say you don't see very often in many tabletop role playing games. But there are a few times where it does pop up here and there, but it doesn't happen very often. I just find it to be a very cool thing. So yeah, there's a little bit of what the world is like. There's cybernetics and augmentations, classic for a a uh, a cyberpunk world. There is pollution. The cities are the only place that are somewhat livable. The outside is basically shit, and you don't really want to go there. There's the rise of mega corporations. Law enforcement does jack shit. The economy is pretty screwed up. And the currency is not in dollars, but in wonglongs, which, as it says here, it's an untrackable currency that has replaced traditional currencies following the manufactured collapse of the banking sector. So there are no banks anymore, though if you wanted to maybe set up like a Wonglong bank, you can if you want. If you're the DM, that's at your own discretion. If you want to be a little bit more, if you want to encompass what your version of this world would be like, but if you want to just strictly follow what the lore is of the world, you can do that too. But yeah, and so yeah. Now that we got a little bit of like generalized summary out of the way of what this world is, let's talk about some of the I guess little changes here and there are like that you will experience if you want to play this game. Which, by the way, I will link the store page to anyone who is interested. By the way, this is not a sponsored video. I am just doing this because I feel like this game should be known a lot more. I've literally played this with a lot of people, and no one's ever heard of this game. And I really hope to maybe spread it out a little more, just get some interest going, and see if people want to play more of it. So yeah, Anyway, so the changes. So what I found out about Carbon 2185 is that some of the mechanics are based off of D&D 5e's with a few tweaks. So for one, the leveling system I would say is a bit more it's a bit more harder to get to. Unlike in D&D where if you kill like a certain specific set of monsters, you will get the XP to level up pretty quickly, I would say. However, in Carbon 2085, some of the enemies have some pretty low XP rewards that it's gonna take some time to get towards those level ups. Unless your DM throws a big giant monster that almost kills you, then you get power leveled. But that's probably not gonna happen, at least I hope. One of the changes I noticed. That for me personally is that the leveling up is a little bit more slower, but it's not too slow. Um, and it's also got the classic dice set just like in any game that uses the D20 system. And then we have character creation. So the main change here is that like in D&D where for rolling your character stats, you roll 4d6, take the lowest one out, and then add that result to that stat. In this, you only roll 2d6 plus 5. Now this little change here is that unlike in D&D where you can get some pretty crazy stats, in this not all of your stats are perfect. You probably have like a few average ones and probably one good one, and you probably got one bad one there. And it's consistent. And with it being 2d6 plus 5, I feel like that's much more how I describe it is more brutal, yet kind of fun. Because unlike in D&D where you can get, like I said, crazy stats where you're basically a tremendous killing machine, in here you have a certain specific set of skills that you have that are not that some of them those skills you have probably are not going to be like the required requirements, I guess you would say, for some certain actions, which I think makes it pretty fun. And still, you could probably get some pretty good stats in here. It's just that they won't be all that great because the chances of getting some very good stats is significantly lower. But you can also use, but like in D&D, you could also use the standard array to if you don't want to roll. Um, and then origin. Origin. Think of it as a race in D&D. Um, so we'll get into what the origins are, and we'll get to what the origins are. But I'll tell you right now, I think there are 6 of them in the core rulebook. There are more in other supplements that they do have if you check out their store. But we won't talk about that here. Once you choose an origin, which you choose an origin, then you get to choose your vice, which is just a role playing mechanic. It's just a role playing mechanic. It's basically a flaw in D&D. But I find the vices in here to be pretty cool. Cool, unlike in D&D where you have a select few from like classes from like backgrounds. So I find that pretty fun. You apply your ability scores. Now here's where the D&D differences are no longer are no longer a thing. In this, you generate a background and you determine your age. So, what this means. So, in Carbon 2185, there is a list of backgrounds that your character can go towards. And let me try and show them to you as we skip through some of the origins and stuff like that. So, let me just go to where is it? It's going to be probably somewhere down below. But you could probably, if you want to pause the video, you can take a quick look at some of the stuff around here. Okay, so here it is. So background generation. So this is basically where you'll get all of your money from and any items that you might have acquired in those jobs. Now, in Carbon 2185, you start, you choose what your character will go into for normal work before they become a cyberpunk. And the terms are 5 years. So for each term, that's a listed number of experience that you got from that job, how much money you made, and possibly even a few goodies here and there. Now, as you can see here at the top of this page, we see that there are several different career paths. There's corporate drone, criminal, entertainer, explorer, laborer, law enforcement, merchant, military, technician, and unskilled worker. Now, with these, they will give you a set of skills, like it says here in the front, it says here in this page, a language or tool that you would use, your money, which is your wage, and the role is based. The role you don't have to worry about that. That's just a flavor text for what you're doing in that role. And the parting gift. Now, parting gifts. There are a few of these jobs that do have parting gifts, but once you reach, I think it was merchant. Yeah, merchant. After merchant, once you go into military, technician, and then skilled worker, you don't get a parting gift. There are no parting gifts for these jobs at all whatsoever. But with every of these jobs, there is a retirement payout, which is basically a little extra money you get when you finish if you want to finish your job. Now it says here, as you can see right there, there's a number of terms you have to meet in order to get that retirement payout. So for this one, the criminal, if you do 4 terms of being a criminal, you get 35,000 wong longs in extra cash that's added to your wage. And then the parting gifts, you roll a d6 to determine what you get. And some of the parting gifts can be pretty crazy. You can get a car with one of these. I think it was the Explorer. Yeah, you can get a coupe if you roll good enough. That's basically a free car. So that's the major difference with Carbon 2185 to D&D 5e is that background generation is really important. Now, however, there is one thing you should keep in mind is injury. So, in every career path, there is the difficulty rating for injury. Now, I have made several characters myself when doing these, and here's the kicker here. If if you fail to roll the DC of the injury, you automatically become poor, and you're forced to stick with that for the for the game until you can get better money, better upgrades and rewards. You're basically stuck with that. So getting injured on the job first try is never a good thing. Which is why it says here for injury is you roll a 2d6 and you add half your intelligence modifier rounded up to see if you meet or beat the injury DC. If you meet the DC, you complete the term. Now, if you are injured when you're doing another term, you unfortunately have to roll a 1d4 to see how many years you you serve that term. And unfortunately, it will not be a full 5-year job term. So once you're injured, you the don't get a language or tool. You don't get a new skill. You still get a wage, which is pretty good, even though you get injured. Actually, no, wait, no, I was wrong. You don't get any extra money, but you still get a parting gift depending on what job you get. So it's pretty rough, and it's pretty rough. So you'll have to contend with the consequences of your roles, which I think is pretty fun because it's never always a one and done situation. Now, next up in our list of things, we also have our origin, which we'll get into. Well, actually, first you then choose your class, which then there's several classes that do have some similarities to some D&D 5e classes, but we'll get into those a little later. Then calculate your skill modifiers and saving throws. Now, for the saving throws, it works like in D&D 3.5, where it is only fortitude, reflex, and mind. You only get three saving throws. You then buy gear and calculate your weight, and then you choose a name. So it's pretty standard character creation stuff. Let's get into origins. So origins, like I said, think of them as the races for D&D. So our first origin is the Badlander, which is a person who has lived out in the wastelands, outside of the cities, who basically lived their whole life there, and then who lived their whole lives in the wastes. So as you can see, you can read maybe some of the lore right here if you want to know a bit more about Badlander. But here are the important traits here. So for Badlander, you have a increase in dexterity by 1. Your age is typically of 70 to 80 years. You were raised in radiation. Your speed, you were 3 feet. Always ready. You have proficiency in light and medium armor, and hollow sight, which is basically as it goes here. It's basically dark vision. However, unlike dark vision, where you don't see everything with all color, here you can't see everything in color. You can only see in shades of gray, just like with night vision. And then there's the language that you have yourself and one you can choose. Then we have sub origins. So we have a bruiser and we have a scavenger. You can read those to see what they're all about. You can pause the video and learn about them. I'll give you a quick second to look over them. And by the way, I won't be going over all of the origins. I'll just be stopping at them to see so that you the viewer could read them if you want. So I'll try to make it quick, but also give you some time to read. So next up is Gutterpunk. Got that lore right there. Here are the traits of the Gutterpunk. Then you have Corporate Kid, which is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll keep it here. It's got your sub-origins as well. Then you got Regular Joe. No, there's not much really to this one. You got Synth, which is basically an android or a robot. Think of these guys as androids from the video game We Become Human, I think is what it was called. I don't remember. Think of it like that. With the synth, they have a few different sub origins, depending on where you want to go with it. And then finally, we have Wormer, which is, in hindsight, it's a taller version of a human. However, you spent your years in space, which is why you're a lot taller. And, here's the stuff for the Wormer. Now, the Wormer is the only origin with off-world Krelio or Creole. I'm not sure how to say that, but this is the only origin with this particular language. And then we have aging. Age is very important in Carbon 2185 because it will also change your stats. And it also shows here at the bottom what's middle age for certain origins, what's old and what's ancient. As you can see here for middle age. So before we continue on, you may be wondering, what the hell is a 1d3? Don't worry, it's just a 1d6 divided by 2. That's all it is. To be honest, it's pretty cool that they decided to do that, which I think is pretty fun. Because realistically, how are you supposed to have a 1d3 dice? I mean, it's not physically possible. I mean, someone could try and make that if they want to, but I'm not sure if it'll be very functional. But anyway, age is pretty important because it determines because it could also change your stats. So for example, middle age, once you reach middle age, you have to roll -1 to one of your physical scores, but you also get to add a +1 to one of your mental scores. Once you reach old, you have to roll to see which one of your physical abilities gets a -2, and then roll a -1 to one of your mental abilities. Then ancient, you have to roll to see which one of your physical ability scores gets a -3, and a -2 to one of your mental ability scores. There is also carbon rejuvenation, which makes people feel young, but you can only do it 4 times until eventually your organs just fail on you. So you can't really do it a whole lot of times. It's also pretty expensive, so I highly doubt you, the player character, would get carbon rejuvenation unless you got the money, which probably at one point might happen. So yeah, and then there's the list of languages that you can choose from. So it's got a long list. It's got all the different ethnicities from the Golden City historically probably I don't know much about San Francisco, but knowing with all these languages, San Francisco probably has a pretty big range of different cultures and ethnicities in that city, in like real life. So yeah. Then we have classes. So the classes, there are going to be a few that seem pretty similar to a few classes you know from D&D, but then there are a few that kind of don't fit the norm of certain classes. So the first one that we have here is Dynamo, which is basically, I would say, is a better barbarian. They're more of the Dynamos are more, as it says here, they are natural leaders and heavy weapons experts. So in this case, they're not too smart, but they have pretty good charisma and good with heavy weapons. The Doc, which is like the cleric of this game. You get to heal people. That's pretty cool. But the cool thing about Doc is that there are a few sub-origins you can go with, like being a combat medic or being a. Actually, I'll show you right here. So you can be a, and also for yeah. So for Doc, you can be a. You get to have an expert. You get to have a specialist feature. You could be a combat medic or a cyber surgeon, which I think are pretty cool. Then we got Enforcer, which is basically your typical fighter of this. Basically middle of the road with some pretty good specialties, I must say. That I find very fun. Like we combat archetype, what it's called. We got rapid deployment, marine, street samurai, which is basically you just use blades, which I think is pretty cool. Then we got hacker, which that one's self-explanatory. You just hack into things, and it's kind of like a spellcaster in a sense, because you got these exploits that you can use against your foes, which is pretty cool. And there's also hacker specialties as well. Got combat hacker, robomancer, investigator. Now this is one class I've been trying to figure out of what could be similar to, but I think it's just its own thing. Um, it's uh, it's got some pretty good stuff. It's basically investigator, self-explanatory. You basically investigate certain thing. You basically are really good at noticing the finer details of a crime scene, or good at reading people when they're lying and stuff like that. And there's also investigative archetypes. You got investigative journalist and private eye investigator. And then finally we got scoundrel, which it's basically just the rogue. It is literally just the rogue in set in a cyberpunk genre. However, and it's even got the same stuff. It's got cunning action and sneak attack expertise, uncanny dodge, evasion. But the scoundrel archetypes are a little bit different. We got so unlike rogue, the scoundrel archetypes are a bit different. For this, we got troublemaker and stuntman and smuggler. So you could have like different flavors of scoundrel. And we already looked over the background generations. Here are some of the biases. We're not going to go over them. There's way too many of them. And then there's equipment. Now, what I must say, equipment in this game is very expensive. Like, it is extremely expensive. Like, if you're thinking that 25,000 Wong Longs is going to get you a firearm, or just a good piece of armor, good luck with finding that. Because the best you're going to get is something really cheap. Like, you see these armors, these the higher you go up for like better stats, the more expensive it'll get. Same with weapons. Now the melee weapons are the cheapest weapons. The firearms are the most expensive thing on the planet, and if you're lucky enough to even buy a gun, congratulations, you managed to get a good job in your background generation. Unlucky for anyone else who doesn't have the money to even buy a pistol. But you could probably grave rob. You could probably just get it off of dead gang members, so it's not that bad. It's just then you have to deal with the ammo, which isn't too expensive. Yeah, the ammo is not too bad. It's pretty cheap, all things considered. You can also rent out a gun if you want as well, if you don't have the money to purchase one, which I think is pretty cool. Um, and there's also attachments and mods you can add to your weapons to make them much more deadly. There's also black market ammo as well for like different types of things, like GPS bullets, where you're able to track the bullet. There's tools, just like any other D&D game. And then vehicles. Now, vehicles are also a very expensive purchase. Like I said, if you got the money to buy, if you got the money, you're probably one of the lucky few to buy a car or a gun. Unlucky for everyone else who can't afford that. And I'm sorry for you. If you rolled very badly and you just became poor, I am so sorry for you. But yeah, you'll eventually be able to buy these vehicles, but when you're starting out at like level 1, yeah, you won't buy a car, unfortunately. So you're gonna have to wait until you get enough money, which is unfortunate, but what are you gonna do? And then we have augmentations, which they basically increase a few stats of your character. Um, the There's different types of augments, and there's also something called blood toxicity, which basically means is that the augments that you have are slowly poisoning you. Like the augments of the that you have on you that they're made from do seep out a form of toxic waste, and if your character is not built enough to deal with that, they will deal with they will have to deal with the effects of basically what is it's basically radiation. But if they're not really built for it, they will instantly die immediately. So yeah. So be careful when choosing out your augments if you got the money for it, because if you purchase let's see, maybe if you purchased a tier 3 augment that has a blood toxicity of 4 while your character only has a blood toxicity of 1, you're gonna be poisoned for the rest of the game. Just so you know. So be careful when choosing out augments. There are 2 free augmentations at tier 0, which is the Neuralink and the basic HUD, which is the most basic augment that you'll find. Everyone is basically that was born in 2185 has these augmentations. Um, for someone that doesn't have that is a rarity. So everyone has this as a commodity. And there's pretty cool effects that all these augmentations have on the body, which is pretty cool. And then there's also something called addiction, where you can become addicted to certain substances, and you have to be careful with them. Uh, and then we have influence. Now, influence. There are 2 types of influence. There's corporate and street, which they basically do the same thing. You basically have access to certain things that the other one does not. However, you can only and now however you can only with certain actions raise one of these influences over the other. So let's say you're helping out a gang member, you will get a certain amount of street influence for that, but your corporate influence will not be raised anyway because, well, it doesn't help. It doesn't help whoever you're working with, the mega corporation you're working with. If you're going against a certain gang member, maybe you're one you're working for, you decide to go against, you will lose some street influence for that, and vice versa. So it depends on what actions you take, depending on your influence, and depending on your influence, you basically get certain things like the auction house, black market, street assignments, corporate assignments. It's basically the same thing. It's almost basically the same thing. Same thing for these. It's just that they happen at different tiers of influence, and the maximum influence you can have is 20. So yeah, so that's a bit about influence. You then have time and resting, social interactions, all that sort of stuff. You then have the cost of living. Basically, you figure out what district you live in, what type of apartment you live in, what's the food like. But if you can't afford any housing, you could just stay in one of the temporary accommodations or just stay in a VR cafe. Travel, that's pretty self-explanatory. Combat, I mean, combat is pretty it's pretty self this is pretty self-explanatory as well. You got attack, dash, disengage, help, hide, ready. You got search, which you could basically search stuff when you're in combat. Use an object, go for cover, and there's like different types of cover that you have. Damage and healing, damage rolls. Now here's the favorite part that I like about this is if you, the player character, get sent to 0 hit points by a critical hit, but is not killed outright, you then get to receive a major injury, which the GM then rolls to see what part of your body is injured, which I find pretty cool because one, it shows some scarring that your character has, and two, it's kind of like a little bit of like story flavor. Like if this if like after this like campaign that you did for this game, you start another one, you can maybe ask one of your players, "Hey, can I use your character as an NPC?" They would have a lot to go by because that character has scars and also has experience and has a pretty good story to tell. And then there's different types of damages as well. The two new ones of actually three new ones in here. Well, I wouldn't say three technically, but I'll list them. I'll list this one as a new one anyway. We got ballistic damage, which is basically from gunshots. Electrical, which is basically lightning damage, and then we have radiation damage as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. There's healing, there's stabilization. You probably know the rest. It's a one or two deal. You know how it is in this game. You know how it works. Initiative is the same as well. There's bonus actions and reactions and stuff like that. There's the bonuses and the modifiers, which I think the numbers are a little bit different. I'm not sure. You can fact check me on that if you would like to. And other things, there's hacking. There's hacking levels. Depending on like what type of security is, you'll need to roll that amount to hack into it. There's skill definitions, which are actually pretty nice. I don't know if D&D has um skill definitions. If you, the viewer, are watching this and you own like a copy of D&D, or just you are like a dungeon master savant, you can tell me if they do have skill definitions. Um, then there is And then there's the world, like explains the world and the corporations that exist. I won't get into that. If you want to buy the PDF of this book or the actual book itself, you can do that. I'm not gonna do that because that'll take way too long. I'm only just going over like the bare basics that I know of this game. Um, so yeah, that is a little, I guess, short generalized info dump of Carbon 2185. If this at all, if you find this TTRPG of any interest to you, I will be putting down the store page for Dragon Turtle Games where they do sell their product. And they also have other merch for it, like other supplements. Like instead of there just being San Francisco, you can play in London, Manhattan, or in Japan, where there's added like content there. There is maps for some pre-generated adventures that the core rulebook does come with. It is called Chow's Request, where if you don't know where to start off, if you're new to this, there's a preset adventure all the way down at the very far back of the book. And I'm just making this video because I just want to show off more of this game because I really had a lovely time running it, and I hope that it gets more, I guess, a popularity around the tabletop world instead of being this one unknown thing that no one knows about. That's what I've seen anyway. I know that the where this book came from is it was made in Lithuania, so there's maybe probably a big audience all the way out there in Lithuania. I am not sure. I can assume so, but yeah, I just really want people to know more about this game, and I just want to show how much I enjoy it and express my knowledge about this book onto you if you are at all interested. So, this is where I'm going to end the video here. It was nice to talk to you about this tabletop RPG, my new favorite one that I really do enjoy. If you want more videos of me, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all guys later.